Mummy Caleb's has ruled her son's house with a hard hand and a harder tongue. Everyone has suffered under her. Her son's wife, her grandchildren, the neighbors, even the church. When Daniel finally finds the courage to send his mother away forever, the whole family expects peace at last. But Lola, the very woman who has suffered the most, refuses to celebrate. She tells her husband that if Mummy Caleb's goes, she will go too. What Lola knows, and what she has carried alone for weeks, will change how this family understands pain, pride, and the difference between punishing someone and truly setting them free. The house on St. Peter's Street, in a quiet corner of Lagos, looked peaceful from the outside. It had blue paint, a small garden of pepper plants, and a wooden cross hanging by the front door. But peace was something that rarely lived inside that house. Not for 5 years. Daniel Caleb's was a manager at a bank in Lagos. He was a hard-working man, the kind of man who paid his tithe before he paid his light bill, and the kind of man who never missed Sunday service unless he was sick. His wife, Lola Caleb's, taught primary school children not far from their home. She was patient, soft-spoken, and the kind of woman who could calm a crying child in seconds, which was a useful skill because she had 3 children of her own. Tina was the first child, 13 years old, quiet and clever, already taller than her mother. Dave was the second child, 11 years old, full of jokes and football and questions that never stopped. Angel was the last child, only 9 years old, the baby of the house, the one who still liked to climb into her mother's lap, even though her legs now hung past her mother's knees. It was a good family. It should have been a happy family. But for over 5 years, one woman had made happiness very hard to find in that house. Daniel's mother, known by everyone simply as Mummy Caleb's. Mummy Caleb's had come to live with them after her husband died. At first, everyone welcomed her with open arms. Lola cooked her favorite soups. The children called her Mama and ran to greet her every morning. But slowly, week by week, year by year, Mummy Caleb's presence began to feel less like a blessing and more like a heavy stone tied around the family's neck. She criticized everything. If Lola cooked the soup, it had too much salt. If she cooked it again, it had too little. If Tina read her books quietly, Mummy Caleb's called her proud and said she was forming Lagos big girl. If Dave laughed too loudly, she said he had no respect. If little Angel cried because she fell and hurt her knee, Mummy Caleb's would hiss and say, "In my days, children did not cry like this. Today's children are soft because their mothers spoil them." She woke up grumbling and went to bed complaining. She gossiped about the neighbors to their faces, and then gossiped about them again behind their backs. Church members who once welcomed her warmly began to find reasons to avoid her after service. Neighbors who once greeted her with smiles now greeted her quickly and walked faster. But the worst part, the part that hurt the most, was that no matter what Mummy Caleb's did, Daniel always took her side. If Lola complained that Mummy Caleb's had insulted her in front of the children, Daniel would sigh and say, "She is my mother, Lola. She is old. Just bear with her." If the children complained that their grandmother had scolded them harshly for no reason, Daniel would say, "Respect your grandmother. She brought me into this world." If neighbors complained that Mummy Caleb's had said something rude to them over the fence, Daniel would apologize on her behalf and then go home and tell his wife to be more patient with his mother. Many nights, Lola cried silently into her pillow, while Daniel slept beside her, exhausted from defending a woman who never once thanked him for it. Many nights Tina would hug her younger siblings and whisper, "It's okay, Daddy will talk to her." But Daddy never really did, not in any way that changed anything. By the time 5 years had passed, almost everyone connected to the Caleb's family had grown tired of pretending things were fine. The Church Women's Fellowship, where Lola once served happily, began to quietly avoid putting her in charge of programs with Mummy Caleb's around, because Mummy Caleb's would always find a way to embarrass her in front of other women. Pastor Joseph, the head of their local assembly, had spoken to Daniel more than once about peace in the home, but Daniel always answered the same way. "Pastor, you know how our mothers are. I cannot disrespect her." The neighbors on St. Peter's Street had their own private joke. Whenever Mummy Caleb's voice rose from inside the blue house, they would simply say, "Ahen, market is open again," and shake their heads. Even Daniel's only sister, Auntie Florence, who lived in the village and visited only a few times a year, seemed unbothered by her mother's behavior. In fact, whenever she visited and saw how things were, she would quietly tell Daniel, "Don't let your wife pressure you to send Mama away. After all, she is your responsibility, not Lola's family's responsibility." Lola never understood why Auntie Florence pushed so hard for Mummy Caleb's to remain exactly where she was, but she had bigger problems to worry about at the time, so she let it go. What nobody in the family knew, what Lola herself did not fully understand until much later, was that Auntie Florence had her own quiet reasons for wanting their mother to stay in Daniel's house and nowhere else. There was a small piece of family land in the village, land that had belonged to their late father, and Mummy Caleb's was the only one who held the original papers. As long as their mother remained settled and comfortable under Daniel's roof, Auntie Florence believed she could one day convince the old woman to sign those papers over to her, quietly, without too many questions. If Mummy Caleb's ever moved elsewhere, especially somewhere with people who might ask sharp questions about her welfare and her property, that plan could fall apart. But that is a thread for later in this story. For now, all anyone in the house on St. Peter Street knew was that Mummy Caleb's was getting harder to manage, not easier, and that something inside her seemed to be growing more restless with each passing month. It started with small comments about the children. "This Dave, why is he so slow in school? Is it from your side, Lola, or from my son's side? This Angel cries too much for her age. Something is not right somewhere. Tina is too quiet. Quiet children carry heavy things inside them. Heavy, heavy things." Lola brushed off these comments at first, but Mummy Caleb's did not stop there. She began telling church members, in hushed tones after service, that she suspected the children were carrying something, a generational curse, she said, that had followed them from their mother's family line. She never said this directly to Lola's face. She said it behind her back, the way poison is often given, quietly, in small doses, until it has done enough damage. One Friday evening, Dave came home from school in tears. He had failed his mathematics test, and his teacher had written a strong note in his book asking his parents to see her. It was nothing unusual. Many children fail a test once in a while, but Mummy Caleb seized on it as proof of what she had been saying all along. "You see," she told Daniel that night while Lola was in the kitchen, "I have been telling you, something dark is following this family. Dave failing his test, Angel's nightmares, Tina's silence. All of it is connected. I cannot just sit and watch my grandchildren suffer like this." Daniel, exhausted from work and unwilling to argue, simply said, "Mama, please don't stress yourself. The children are fine." But Mummy Caleb's was not satisfied. She had heard, through a church sister, about a powerful prophet who lived 2 streets away. A man people called Prophet Igwe, known for his deliverance sessions that could cut every curse at the root. Without telling her son or her daughter-in-law, Mummy Caleb's visited Prophet Igwe in secret and arranged for him to come to the house the following Saturday, a day she knew Daniel would be traveling to Ibadan for a work conference, and Lola would be away at a teacher's training workshop until evening. It would be, she believed in her heart, an act of love. She was, in her own twisted way, trying to protect her grandchildren the only way she knew how. That Saturday morning began like any other. Daniel kissed his wife and children goodbye and left early for his trip. Lola, dressed neatly for her workshop, hugged each of her children and reminded Tina, the eldest, to keep an eye on her younger siblings until their grandmother, who was, after all, an adult in the house, returned from wherever she was going. By 10 o'clock, Mummy Caleb's had drawn the curtains in the sitting room. By 11, Prophet Igwe arrived with 2 assistants, a small bell, a bottle of dark liquid, and a Bible he barely opened. He instructed the children to kneel in the center of the room. Tina, old enough to sense that something was wrong, asked carefully, "Mama, where is this man from? Does Daddy know about this?" "Don't ask me too many questions," Mummy Caleb snapped. "I am your grandmother. I know what is good for you." Dave knelt obediently, frightened and confused. Little Angel, only 9, began to cry softly, unsettled by the strange smell of incense and the prophet's loud, booming voice as he walked around them chanting words none of them understood. "There is a spirit of failure on this boy," Prophet Igwe declared, pointing at Dave. "There is a spirit of nightmares on this small girl." He pointed at Angel, who cried harder. "Stop crying," Mummy Caleb's hissed at Angel. "Crying like this shows the spirit is fighting back. You must be strong. Confess. Tell us what is troubling you." But Angel was 9 years old. She did not understand what she was supposed to confess. She only knew she was frightened, hungry. She had not been given breakfast because Mummy Caleb said fasting was necessary for the deliverance to work, and she wanted her mother. When Angel's crying did not stop, and when she pulled back from the strange liquid Prophet Igwe tried to make her drink, Mummy Caleb's, gripped by something between fear and frustration, raised her hand and slapped the little girl across the cheek. "I said stop crying." The room went silent. Even Prophet Igwe paused. Dave froze. Tina's eyes filled instantly with tears, but something inside her, something brave that 13-year-olds sometimes find when no adult is being brave for them, pushed her to her feet. "I am going to call my mother," Tina said, her voice shaking but firm. "Sit down," Mummy Caleb's ordered. "Nobody is calling anybody. We are not finished." But Tina did not sit down. While the prophet was distracted, demanding an offering from Mummy Caleb's before he would continue the work, Tina quietly slipped out the back door, ran across the small garden, climbed over the low fence, and knocked frantically on the door of their neighbor, Auntie Ngozi. "Please," Tina said, breathless and crying. "Please call my mummy. Something bad is happening in our house." Auntie Ngozi, who had heard enough strange noises from the Caleb's house over the years to take a 13-year-old's panic seriously, immediately picked up her phone and dialed Lola's number. Lola was in the middle of a workshop session when her phone rang. She almost ignored it, until she saw it was Auntie Ngozi, who never called unless it was important. "Lola," Auntie Ngozi said, her voice tight with worry. "You need to come home now. Tina just ran to my house crying. She said something is happening with your mother-in-law and your children." Lola did not wait to hear more. She grabbed her bag, apologized quickly to her colleagues, and rushed out to find a taxi. The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of her life. Her hands shook. Her mind ran through every terrible possibility a mother's mind can imagine. When she finally arrived and pushed open the front door, what she found stopped her heart for a moment. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the daylight. Thick incense smoke hung in the air. Dave was kneeling on the floor, eyes red from crying. Angel sat curled in a corner, holding her cheek, sobbing quietly, a faint mark still visible on her small face. Prophet Igwe stood in the middle of the room with a cloth bag, counting Naira notes that Mummy Caleb's had just handed him. For one long second, Lola could not speak. Then something inside her, the part of every mother that will fight a lion bare-handed for her child, took over. "Get out of my house," Lola said, her voice low and shaking with a fury none of them had ever heard from her before. "Get out of my house this instant." Prophet Igwe tried to protest, saying the deliverance was not yet complete, that stopping halfway was dangerous. Lola did not listen. She picked up his bell, his bottle, and the bag he had not yet finished filling with money, and pushed all of it into his hands. "If you do not leave my house in the next 1 minute," she said, "I will call the police myself, and we will discuss what kind of prophet slaps a 9-year-old child." Something about the steel in her voice made even the prophet's assistants move quickly toward the door. Within minutes, they were gone. Lola turned to Mummy Caleb's, who stood frozen by the window, suddenly looking smaller than Lola had ever seen her. But Lola did not have words for her mother-in-law in that moment. She had children to hold. She gathered Angel into her arms first, then pulled Dave close, then found Tina, who had run back from the neighbor's house, standing trembling in the doorway. Lola held all 3 of her children at once, right there on the floor of the sitting room, and let them cry until the shaking in their small bodies began to slow down. Daniel returned from Ibadan that evening, tired from his trip, expecting a quiet welcome home. Instead, he found his wife sitting on the edge of their bed, her eyes swollen from crying, and his 3 children unusually silent in the sitting room. When Lola told him everything, the secret prophet, the fasting, the fear, the slap across his youngest daughter's face, Daniel's hands began to tremble. "She did what?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She invited a strange man into this house, Daniel. She let him scare our children. She let him hit Angel, our Angel." Daniel walked, almost in a daze, to his mother's room. Mummy Caleb sat on her bed, quiet for once, as if she already knew what was coming. "Is it true?" Daniel asked. "Did you slap Angel? Did you let that man frighten my children?" Mummy Caleb's lifted her chin, defensive even now. "I was trying to protect them. You don't understand these things, Daniel. There was a curse on this house and—" "Stop," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "Stop talking about curses. My daughter has a mark on her face from your hand, Mama. My son was kneeling on a cold floor for hours without food. My first daughter had to run to a neighbor's house, alone, frightened, because her own grandmother frightened her more than any stranger could." For 5 years, Daniel had defended his mother against every complaint, every tear, every warning sign. But the sight of his daughter's small face with a red mark on it had broken something in him that nothing else had managed to break. "Pack your things," Daniel said. "I want you out of this house. I want you out of my life. I have given you 5 years of patience that you did not deserve, and you have used it to hurt the people I love most. I am done." The room went still. Even Mummy Caleb's, sharp-tongued and unshaken by almost everything, seemed to have no words left. Word of what happened spread quickly, first to the children's grandmother on Lola's side, who came rushing over, then to Auntie Ngozi next door, then to the church, then somehow even to Auntie Florence in the village. Everyone who heard the story reacted the same way, relief and even quiet joy. "Finally," said one neighbor, "that woman has been terrorizing this street for years." "God has heard our prayers," said a church sister. "Daniel has finally seen sense." Even Auntie Florence, calling from the village, said, "Well, if Mama has to leave, she can come and stay with me." Her voice carried something that sounded almost too eager, though no one paid close attention to that at the time. Everyone expected Lola, more than anyone, to be celebrating. After all, she had suffered the most. She had absorbed 5 years of insults, 5 years of being undefended, 5 years of watching her children flinch at the sound of their grandmother's footsteps. But when Daniel told her that night that his mother would be gone by morning, Lola did not smile. She did not sigh in relief. Instead, she sat very still for a long moment, and then she said the words that shocked everyone who would later hear about them. "Daniel, if you send your mother away like this, with nowhere to go, with no plan, with nothing but anger pushing her out the door, I will not stay in this marriage with you. I will take the children and go to my mother's house." Daniel stared at his wife as if she had spoken a different language. "Lola, are you hearing yourself? This is the same woman who let a stranger hit our daughter, and you want to defend her?" "I am not defending what she did," Lola said quietly. "What she did was wicked, and it must never happen again. But sending her out of this house in pure anger, with no plan for where she goes or what becomes of her, is not justice, Daniel. It is just another wound added to a long line of wounds. And I am afraid of what kind of family we will become if we let anger be the only thing that decides what happens next." The next morning, before Daniel could act on his anger, Lola asked for one thing: a chance to speak privately with her mother-in-law, just the 2 of them, before anyone packed a single bag. Mummy Caleb's, surprised and wary, agreed. In that quiet room, Lola finally told her something she had been carrying alone for almost 2 months. "Mama," Lola began gently, "do you remember the day in March when you and I sat outside peeling agouti seeds and you started crying for no reason you could explain?" Mummy Caleb's face changed. She remembered. "You told me something that day," Lola continued. "You told me that before Daniel was born, you lost 2 babies. You told me that your own mother-in-law back then accused you of carrying a curse, of being unfit to be a wife, and that your husband's family nearly sent you back to your father's house in disgrace, with nothing, no explanation, no support, no kindness. You said the only thing that saved you was finally having Daniel, because after that, no one dared call you cursed again. Mummy Caleb's hands trembled in her lap. She had told Lola this in a moment of weakness, never expecting her daughter-in-law to remember it, let alone bring it up again. I never told anyone what you said that day, Lola continued. Not even Daniel. I kept it because I saw how much shame it carried for you. But Mama, I think that pain never left you. I think you have spent years afraid of being seen as weak, as cursed, as something to be thrown away. And so you built walls of criticism and control around yourself, so no one could ever make you feel small again. I think, somewhere twisted inside your fear, you genuinely believed that bringing that prophet here was protecting your grandchildren, the same way you wished someone had protected you, all those years ago. Mummy Caleb's began to cry. Not the dramatic, accusing tears she sometimes used as a weapon, but quiet, broken tears that came from somewhere much deeper. That does not make what you did right, Lola said softly, taking her mother-in-law's hand. What happened to Angel was wrong, and there must be real consequences. But if we throw you out of this house with nowhere safe to go, with no one to help you face what is broken inside you, we will simply be repeating what was done to you 40 years ago. And I refuse to raise my children to believe that the answer to pain is always to throw the wounded person away. I want my children to learn that consequences and compassion can live in the same house. When Daniel learned what his wife had done, speaking privately with his mother, uncovering a story even he had never heard, he was stunned into a different kind of silence. That evening, the family gathered with Pastor Joseph and his wife, Pastor Mrs. Joseph, who was known in their church for her wisdom in counseling broken families. Together, they built a plan that was neither soft punishment nor cold abandonment. Mummy Caleb's would leave the house on St. Peter's Street. That decision did not change. The children needed to feel, immediately and clearly, that what happened to them would never be allowed to happen again under that roof. But instead of being sent away in anger with nowhere to go, Mummy Caleb's would stay temporarily with the church's Women's Fellowship guest house, where Pastor Mrs. Joseph herself would walk with her through proper counseling, real counseling, not deliverance sessions from strange men with bells and bottles. When Auntie Florence heard the plan over the phone and quickly suggested again that their mother simply come stay with her in the village instead to save everyone the stress, Daniel finally asked the question that had never crossed his mind before. Florence, why are you always so eager for Mama to be wherever you are, and never willing to ask the harder questions about why she's struggling in the first place? There was a pause on the line. Then Auntie Florence mentioned, almost too casually, that since their mother would be free now and no longer carrying her usual responsibilities, it might be a good time to finally settle that small land paper matter from their late father's estate. Daniel went quiet. For the first time, he understood that even within his own family, his mother's pain had been something other people were quietly hoping to use for their own gain. He told his sister, gently but firmly, that no land papers would be discussed until their mother had healed enough to make such decisions with a clear and steady mind, surrounded by people who genuinely had her well-being at heart, not her property. 2 weeks into her stay at the Fellowship guest house, Mummy Caleb's asked to see her grandchildren. Lola was cautious, but agreed, on the condition that Pastor Mrs. Joseph would be present. When the children arrived, Mummy Caleb's did something none of them, not Tina, not Dave, and especially not Angel, had ever seen her do before. She knelt down, slowly, her old knees protesting, until she was at eye level with little Angel. "I am sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I hurt you, and there is no curse, no spirit, nothing in this world that makes that okay. I was wrong. I was afraid, and I let my fear hurt the people I should have protected the most. Will you forgive your grandmother?" Angel, with the easy, generous heart that only children seem to carry so naturally, hugged her grandmother tightly and said, "I forgive you, Mama, but please, no more prophets." Even Pastor Mrs. Joseph smiled through her tears at that. Mummy Caleb's apologized to Dave for years of harsh words about his schoolwork, and to Tina for calling her proud when really, the girl had simply learned to protect herself by staying quiet. She apologized, last of all, to Lola, not just for the prophet, but for 5 years of criticism, gossip, and cruelty that Lola had carried silently, determined never to break up her marriage over it. "I am sorry, my daughter," Mummy Caleb said. "You have shown me more mercy than I have ever shown you. I do not deserve it, but I am grateful for it." Months passed. Mummy Caleb's did not move back into the house on St. Peter's Street immediately. Real trust, Lola often reminded the children, is not something that returns the moment someone says sorry. It is something rebuilt slowly, through changed actions proven over time. Mummy Caleb's continued her counseling sessions with Pastor Mrs. Joseph. She learned, for the first time in decades, to speak about her old pain instead of hiding it behind sharp words and suspicion. Slowly, the woman who once criticized everything began to notice good things instead. Dave's improving grades, Tina's gentle kindness to her younger siblings, Angel's bright laughter, which had returned, slowly, like sunlight after rain. Daniel changed too. He learned that honoring his mother did not mean obeying her at the expense of his wife and children. He learned that real respect for a parent sometimes means telling them the truth, even when the truth is hard, and that love and boundaries are not enemies. They can, in fact, be the very things that save a relationship worth saving. Eventually, Mummy Caleb's moved into a small flat near the church, close enough to visit, far enough to respect the boundaries the family had agreed on. She visited every Sunday after service, bringing roasted corn for the children and, more importantly, bringing a gentler version of herself. Auntie Florence, for her part, eventually returned the land papers conversation to its proper place, handled openly, fairly, with the whole family present, once their mother was strong enough to make decisions clearly and without pressure from anyone. The house on St. Peter's Street became, slowly but surely, the peaceful home it had always had the potential to be. Moral lessons from this story. Honoring your parents does not mean staying silent when they cause harm. True honor sometimes requires loving correction, not endless silence that allows pain to continue. 2. Hurt people often hurt others, but understanding someone's pain does not excuse the harm they cause. Compassion and accountability must walk together, not replace each other. 3. Not everyone who speaks in God's name carries God's Spirit. The Bible reminds us to test the spirits, because true faith brings peace and truth, never fear, manipulation, or harm to children. 4. Forgiveness and restored trust are two different things. You can forgive someone fully in your heart while still requiring them to earn back trust through real, consistent change. 5. A marriage covenant means choosing your spouse and children's well-being first, without using respect for parents as an excuse to allow ongoing harm in your own home. 6. Hidden family secrets and unhealed pain do not disappear. They often repeat themselves in the next generation. Healing requires bringing painful truths into the light, with people who can be trusted to handle them gently. 7. Justice and mercy are not opposites. They can live in the same decision. Consequences for wrongdoing do not have to mean total abandonment. Sometimes the most loving thing a family can do is hold someone accountable while still walking with them toward healing.
If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel so that you can be notified when we drop more interesting stories. Leave comments below. Thanks for watching.